Welcome back to the Tapes Archive podcast, where we release interviews that have never been heard before. In this episode, we have drummer extraordinaire Alex Van Halen. At the time of this interview in 1981, Van Halen was 28 years old and was out on tour supporting Van Halen's fourth record, Fair Warning. In this rare interview, Alex talks about working with producer Ted Templeman, how Van Halen promoted shows before they got signed, why he hated high school, and his prediction for Van Halen's future. As always, we have music critic Marc at the helm conducting the interview. If you'd like to support the show, please like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. There, we post other content and information not available on the podcast. If you'd like to read the transcripts for any of our episodes, please head over to our website at thetapesarchive.com. We'll jump into the interview after a quick word from our sponsors. The Tapes Archive is proud to be sponsored by the true crime documentary Dead Man's Line.
You've got 100 armed officers around here trying to get a shot at me. I dared them to shoot me. I didn't go down there to be a buffoon. I went down there for vengeance. And by God, I'll have vengeance.
In 1977, Tony KIRITSIS kidnapped a mortgage broker and held him captive for 3 days. For the first time ever, the media was able to cover the event live. To some, Tony was a hero. To others, he was a crazed thug. Dead Man's Line, the true story of Tony KIRITSIS.
This award-winning film is available exclusively on Amazon Prime. One last thing before we get to the interview, the Tapes Archive podcast is a proud member of Osiris Media, a global community connecting passionate fans with podcasts and experiences about artists and topics you love. Thanks for tuning in, and now it's time to open the vault.
So you're telling me about the sound system out there and the tonal qualities. When you mix your albums, do you go with a small speaker and make it, do you blow it up?
When we go in the studio, we take all our stage gear, set it up in a big room, and play live. Of course, there are separation baffles, just in case something goes wrong where you have to fix up a guitar or overdub something. And Dave is in a separate booth, but we all do play and sing at the same time, which, unlike most bands who go in, lay down a rhythm track, and build on top of that over and over and so forth, until it's such a fat sound, attempt a fat sound by massive overdubbing, which we don't do. If you listen to the records, you'll notice there are very few, if any, overdubs. Occasional rhythm guitar at most. And Ted Templeman takes care of the technical aspect of it. He puts down vinyl.
There was somebody who was talking about, there's an article on Rolling Stone about Mike Chapman. And Mike Chapman said that he wouldn't want Ted Templeman to produce any of the groups he produced because he thinks Ted Templeman all make them sound the same. How about working with Ted Templeman?
I think it's the exact opposite. I tend to say that about Mike Chapman. Ted has produced such a diversity of acts, anywhere from the Doobie Brothers to Ronnie Montrose, Van Halen. He does Nicolette Larson, Little Feat. Are you trying to tell me those bands sound alike?
No, not at all.
Come on, Chapman, wake up. I didn't read the article, so I don't know what he said word for word.
It's in the new one.
But we've been approached by a variety of producers, especially in the beginning, when we were being signed. And we chose Ted because when we sat down with him, he was open. It wasn't like a lot of producers put their stamp, so to speak. It's their sound on the record. A lot of times you can hear a band, you don't even know who the band is, but yet you can tell or pretty well guess who produced it. And like I said, we have been approached by certain producers, and at one point, one of the gentlemen said, listen, this is my record, you're going to do it my way, or we won't do it at all. So we said, all right, we won't do it. Goodbye. Enter Ted Templeman.
I wanted to ask you about the Pueblo, Colorado thing that was written about in Rolling Stone, also something about wrecking a lot.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's blown hugely out of proportion. There was a little bit of food spilled on the floor, but as far as being smeared with lasagna and all this garbage, that's what it was, garbage. It's not true at all. I think what happened was the college board or the school board just didn't want that brand new building being subjected to massive rock and roll audiences. And he figured, well, we'll just grab any band. I think we're just a scapegoat. Obviously, we didn't leave the dressing room spotless, but there was no damage. There were no urinals ripped off the wall and whatever else they said that we behaved like animals because, after all, this is our living, it's our job, and we know we have to come back and play there again. So we'll only be cutting our own throats, and it's not true at all.
What about brown M&Ms in your contract? Is that true?
All right, everybody has to have a little sense of humor, and yes, it's true. No, if there's brown M&Ms in our bucket, we won't play. I'll tell you, one of these days, somebody's going to get that little piece of paper wrapped around a brown M&M thrown through his window in the middle of the night, and they'll know who it's from. But we don't take that too seriously.
No, but that is in your contract?
Yes, it is.
For any
and legally, we don't like brown M&Ms.
Let's talk about the aesthetics of M&Ms. Brown M&Ms taste different from other M&Ms?
Yes, they do.
They do?
They do. They are more heavily sugar-coated. They contain more chocolate. Mm-hmm. The green ones and the yellow ones are much more refreshing. What do you think, Eddie?
What about the red ones? Do you miss the red ones? I always...
Yeah, I don't particularly go for the red ones that much. Like I said, my main objection is brown, and that's all there's to it.
Is this a running thing throughout the band, or is it just your...
Well, yes, it was actually David's first objection was brown M&Ms. Mm-hmm. Michael doesn't like M&Ms at all. Ed only likes jujubes, and you believe that? I got a bridge you might be interested in buying.
The band seems to relate extremely well to the audiences, and I guess the average age of your audience, maybe, correct me if you think I'm wrong, 15, 16, around there?
No, it varies anywhere from, I'd say, 15 to 21 or so. And we get older audience as well. But the reason we relate so well is because we are the audience. What we're doing on stage is what we always wanted to see being done on stage. And the reason it goes over so well, we've traveled the world. We've gone to Japan, we've gone to all of Europe, England, places where they don't speak English, places where they do speak English. And even though they don't understand the lyrics and don't understand exactly what Dave is saying between songs, they get the feeling, they relate. And I think it's because there's a little bit of Van Halen in everybody. And we're just there to bring it out. And tonight, you'll witness it. We'll bring it all out. There's a Van Halen show is one of the last places where you can actually just yell and scream and thrash your arms about and do almost anything you want, short of hurting somebody or killing somebody, and get away with it.
What about violence in the audience? Do you see that at all?
We've seen very little of it. Of course, you're going to get a few guys are always going to ruin it.
Steve was mentioning something about an M80 blowing off in one of the fire marshal's ears last night, something of that nature.
You get that anywhere. Take a look at a football game. People are always knocking rock concerts for being violent and such. Have you ever seen a European football game, or an American one for that matter? The fans they're fanatical. Even if their team loses, they get pissed and they beat up on the other side. Look at the high school games. Look at the violence that goes on there, and that's when they're still stone cold sober.
How did a band like Van Halen come out of Los Angeles, which is it's one of the...
We've been asked that a lot. First of all, we're not from L.A. That's where we got together. I'm from Amsterdam, so is Edward. We grew up basically in Holland, moved here about 10 years ago. And Dave's from the Midwest. He's from Bloomington, Indiana. Mike is from Chicago. And we'd all been playing around the L.A. area. Now, L.A. is not all the laid back that people think it is. Well, it depends on where you live. A lot of people, when you say L.A., think of Hollywood. Other people think of the beach. But there are places in the middle of nowhere where there are just people who, beer drinkers and hellraisers, so to speak. It could be anywhere in the middle of Texas, for all you know. And then again, there are the beaches, and there are the mountains, and there is the Hollywood. But there is a variety of stuff in between. That's why we don't sound like the Eagles, because we aren't from L.A.
There's a quote in here that David I'd like to pick up on and see what you think. He says, according to about heavy metal, he's saying what we're getting these days is clones of clones. I like the original Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Who, but they've undergone so many changes, it's become bastardized in so many ways. And he's talking about clones of music now. How, considering that these bands were probably the beginning of heavy metal, how is Van Halen different? Is Van Halen's obviously not a clone?
Well, first of all, heavy metal, back when it first started, meant 20-minute guitar solos, half-hour drum solos, songs that went on in epic proportions. Van Halen does it in 3 minutes. I mean, why take a half an hour when you're doing 3? And vice versa could also be true, but I think people don't have that long of an attention span. They get bored very easily. I know for a fact that when I see some of the bigger bands and the drum solo happens, I'm a drummer, if it goes on for more than 5, 10 minutes, when it reaches in 20 minutes, I'll be out there. I'll be one of the first to get out and get a hot dog. And then I'll come back and probably won't miss a thing.
So there's a minimum of solos in the band?
I would say there are solos, but not to the extent, not playing a solo for the sake of having a solo there. Mm-hmm. It used to become almost standardized. I mean, when it was near the end of the set, you knew the drummer was going to do a drum solo. In the middle of the set, when the guitarist walked out by himself, you knew he was going to stand there for 15 minutes and go into, God knows what, green sleeves. Besides, I think our songs have memorable melodies as well. I hear lots of people just humming along with the song, singing along, even when the music isn't playing. I don't know what kind of vitamins they take.
And I've been walking around singing "Everybody Wants Some" all day.
Yeah,
another words.
Everybody wants some. Well, that's another thing. Our lyrics are not into space or into something you don't understand. The third planet from the moon or the star, whatever. I mean, it's pretty basic. When you say, "I can't wait to feel your love tonight," you don't need to use your imagination very much, I don't think.
Who's the best heavy metal band you ever saw?
That I ever saw? I've seen them all, and I think each band that I've seen has something special to offer. As a matter of fact, I've even seen some punk acts that I think are new wave, whatever you want to call them, like The Damned. They played 15 minutes, and in 15 minutes they played about 25 songs, I think it was. I'm not exaggerating. Those guys are just so hyper. They were on stage and they were off. And I was going, whoa! The music wasn't really there, but I mean, the show was. And I think every band has something to offer. You go see Yes, it's more like sitting down an evening with Yes, and they duplicate the record. I mean, they duplicate the record, which sometimes makes me wonder why pay $9 or $10 for a ticket, and have to sit there, barely be able to see, lousy acoustics, when you could much rather sit at home with a nice stereo. If you want to hear the record duplicated, listen to your stereo. I enjoyed Sabbath very much. I like Grand Funk. And I gotta say, it was a pleasure to play with Sabbath. For their 10th anniversary, we toured with them all of UK and most of the States. And that was a pleasure. But other than that, I really can't remember that many heavy metal acts. Of course, everybody goes see Zeppelin once a year. It must be a ritual or something. But since we've been touring so much, I haven't had the time.
Do you think that Van Halen's the best heavy metal act now?
I wouldn't call it heavy metal. Again, we like to call it big rock, for lack of a better term. Well, it's got to look like it sounds and sound like it looks. Like we were talking when you looked at the PA setup. It's not actually overkill. Other bands use that system to fill a 40,000 seater. We do it to fill a 10 to 15,000 seater because we feel you don't have to crank that thing to the point where it distorts and it hurts your ears to get the same level of decibels, as you can with this system. We can sit there and drive it, say halfway, and it won't distort, but yet it'll be super, it's hard to explain. It's like sense around. You feel it,
Probably the acoustics in here help a little bit.
I heard the acoustics or something else in here. But our music doesn't need acoustics.
I think the last time you played in Boston, you played the Orpheums.
Yeah.
Right? Gone a long way in a comparatively short amount of time. How have things changed internally in the band since then?
All our sex lives are better now. Internally, not at all. We're the same as we've always been. We've always wanted to do this. We used to play for free. As a matter of fact, when we started out, before we had a manager, before we had a record contract, we never had an agent. All we would do was take some flyers, some leaflets, put our picture on there. We'd rent the hall, put the date on it, and just plaster the entire LA area. And before we knew it, we could draw about 5,000 people to these shows. It was all done by ourselves. We would set up the stage. We would rent the PA with the money that we knew we were going to make. And it was just recycled. The shows got bigger and bigger, more equipment, more people, and it just went on and on and on and on. And then when we signed the record, we did it all over the world.
Do you find yourself getting caught up in any sort of bureaucracy now that it's bigger?
No, because we run everything ourselves. We work very closely with the record company. We work very closely with our management. And luckily enough, we've had a say in almost everything that we do. Anywhere from the material that's on the album, to the album cover, to where we tour, when we tour, the clothes we wear. A lot of people Like your manager telling me, hey, what time to go to bed? Oh, to wake up, eat now. Things like that. We were pretty much left up to our own.
Would you ever like to
be a manager? I don't know.
Control your audiences a little more, to be able to say to them,
like I said,
maybe we think you should cool out a little or something.
I think we are the audience. That's the whole thing. The people relate to that. It's just people can tell if you're phony. If you're trying to act something that you're not. If you have to put on your suit to go out to play. I'll tell you one thing. Dave's the same off stage as he's on. He's always mouth, and he's always singing and wearing funny clothes. It shows. And as far as controlling the audience, again, why control them? They're there to have a good time. It's an escape. If you want to be controlled, go to school. Your teacher will tell you what to do.
Can I ask you how far you went in school?
Yeah. How far did I go in school? I used to walk in and then walk right back out. No, of course I graduated. I mean, that's some kind of state law says you have to graduate from high school, more or less. And they were more or less happy to get rid of me, so I said, I bid adieu.
Would you say that people in high school will remember you as they would figure that what you're doing now is pretty typical of what
either that or in jail? I don't know. I got to be quite honest with you. I never went to school that much. I figured I knew more than the teachers did, and the quality of education was not up to my standards or up to par. I mean, if I figured I had to sit and listen to somebody for 45 minutes trying to explain something which I already knew 5 years ago, then something's got to be wrong. So I would just come in. In the other area. Now in Holland it was different. Of course, I was younger also. Yeah. So that made a difference.
When did you leave Holland?
About 10, 15 years ago. It's kind of hard to pinpoint, everything just kind of runs together. It doesn't change, it doesn't get bigger or smaller, just longer.
Does it have any influence on you now?
Yeah, I think it does. I think everything has an influence on you one way or another. I'm surprised you haven't asked us yet about how we write the songs or anything. What I was going to say was that
we used to write the words.
Well, no. Whereas your influences and such. Yeah. Ed and I studied classical piano in Holland, and then we started playing rock and roll. We were a little bit older. Dave as well as sang around with the radio, and Mike, I don't know, I think he just eats his bass strings for fun. But when we played the clubs, which we did for quite a while, we had a repertoire of about 300 different songs, maybe more. And it was by such a variety of artists. It was almost unbelievable. And all we had was one guitar, one bass, one vocal, and one drum. So we had to twist the music. We had to Van Halenize it to make it fit to our instrumentation, which teaches you a lot about arranging and such. And, all of the songs were recognizable. Everything did sound like Van Halen. And then it was still danceable, so we could still play at the club because if the people weren't dancing, the club owner would boot you out, right? So it served as two purposes at the same time. And it carried out over into writing our own music. There's a little bit of everything in there. My personal tastes vary a little bit with Dave's, which again, vary a little bit with Ed's. But when we all get together, it's like, a big soup. And it shows in the music. Listen to some of Ed's guitar solos, like Eruption or Spanish Fly. There is a little bit of classical influence in there.
What song would I be most surprised that you did a cover of?
You're no good. You mean next album?
Yeah. Well, no. When you were playing clubs and you said you had 300 songs.
Oh, I'd say, okay, we did some stuff by Ohio Players, Get Down Tonight.
Really?
Yeah, we used to do some old James Brown. It's Your Thing. But then again, at the other end, we did some Deep Purple. We did Black Sabbath. We did, Deal with the Preacher by Bad Company. You name it, we played it. We played anything and everything. And it seemed that the wider the scope of style of music, we played everything except for jazz. People just didn't know how to dance to it. And we didn't really care for it that much. I mean, solos are one thing, but we didn't want to introduce a sax section.
Or the orchestra that he talks about here, a big 24-piece orchestra.
Yeah, we don't need that.
Band's not going to play live anymore, just going to bring an orchestra out.
Yeah, right. Well, as you very well know, I'm not going to name names, but very many bands do that. And they even have extra hidden musicians underneath the stage or in the back. As a matter of fact, Grand Funk carried around, what's his name, Chris Frost?
Craig Frost.
They carried around for years before anybody knew there was an organist. And they finally had said, well, shit, as long as you've been playing with us, you may as well be on the album cover and get credit for it as well. So And other bands tape their stuff, pre-tape, and play it. No, again, I was
right. No names. That's another thing. I was reading something about, I think, Toto, and they have a singer who stands backstage.
A singer who's backstage?
Yeah, because the singer they have can't hit the high notes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, that's what I read.
Okay, this is backstabbing hour. Listen, guys.
Getting back to what I asked you before, since you're not heavy metal, are you the best at what you do?
I think we're the most sincere, and we do it to the best of our capability. They came out great. And we're not lazy. We enjoy it. We mean what we do. We mean what we say, and we're on the level. And we do it 10 months a year, and the other 2 months we spend in the studio and rehearsing and writing and making the next album so we can do it all over again. It's one big vacation land.
Do you think your audiences will grow with the band? If you go, another 3-4 years, will the same crowd still be?
Okay, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think judging by how much the audience has increased over the last 2-3 years, as you just mentioned, from playing a 2,000-seater to a 10,000-seater, I think, yeah. Our music is, I hate to use the word readily accessible, but it is. You listen to it and it makes you feel good. And there's an old saying, if it sounds good, it is good. Duke Ellington said that. And that's the truth. Now, he knew what he was talking about. Because I did go to college for a little bit for music, and they told me I was a musical prostitute because I was writing songs with no more than 3 or 4 chords. And I said, listen, it's harder to write a melody for a song with 3 or 4 chords than it is to sit there and modulate and sit there and change keys and meter and beat, and all this jazz to get some kind of song across, which nobody can make sense out of. Not even the guys who are playing it or writing it. They don't even know. They don't understand. So I left.
It's interesting when you talk about you've had musical training, you've studied classical piano. I think that the majority of the things I read about the band, you would think that you guys just picked up guitars and started to play one day, and found you could make melodies that people enjoyed. But,
well, it may just as well have been, because I'll tell you, a lot of that training had absolutely no application. It's nice to know, but what good is it if you know that the key of F has 1 flat, okay? What difference does it make?
What about the reviews? Do you read them? Do you care about them? They're obviously not affecting yourself.
No. Generally, we're in the next town by the time the review comes out. I think some of the reviewers, some of the critics are good at what they do, and they should be commended. I mean, they know their profession and they do it well. Others, I think, are like a virgin trying to describe the pleasures of sex. I mean, they don't understand. They don't know. But in the long run, I don't think it matters, because just like you read album reviews, which are sometimes so drastically opposite, I mean, it makes you wonder who actually knows what the hell he's talking about. I mean, one guy says it stinks, and the other completely opposite, possibly even on the next page of the same magazine will say, my God, this is fantastic. I mean, Messiah, and come down. I mean, so it just wonders. I think it's just a matter of personal taste.
It's interesting because Dave Marsh wrote a piece on Ted Nugent recently and wrote a bit about Van Halen and said how great Nugent was, but how he couldn't stand Van Halen, how terrible they were, what they did. And that's what I wonder. You read that after a while and you start going, hey, this is...
Well, I think as long as they don't pull any punches on it, it's all right. I don't care what they say. Mm-hmm. But if he does it in a slanderous way or has nothing to back it up with, then I think that the guy's off the wall.
Yeah. Well, obviously, the thing...
You can take this and stick it up your nose, Dave Marsh.
The thing is, I read a lot of criticism, and I tell people who get really upset about it, hey, it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to not buy the album. I tell you what I don't like. So.
Well, I'm just, I'm not in defense of it, but Ed won this year's guitar player poll as the best rock guitarist. He beat out Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Ted Nugent. No, I don't think he was even a runner-up. Well, maybe he was. But, and that's a more artist-oriented magazine. More guitarists, people who actually play the instrument buy that magazine, and they're the ones who vote, as opposed to people like Dave Marsh who know nothing about guitars, probably. How many strings does a guitar have?
How do you get along with your brother?
Oh, fine. You know, we have the obvious. Nobody gets along great all the time.
Yeah.
We have the rows, the fights, and whatnot.
But you always hear about the Kinks, you know, and Dave Davies and Ray Davies, how they try to stab each other.
Oh yeah. Well, that happened in our younger years, but as we grow older, I mean, you know, after all, it is a felonious offense. You end up in jail, even though he is kin.
In this article, the guy who wrote it said just what heavy metal is, and he says the person who wrote this said art, it's not. In other words, heavy metal is not art. Is what you do art? I mean, you know, you say it's not heavy metal.
Art is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how to start on this one. I think it's art in the fact that it's going to last for a while. I mean, it is on vinyl. 20 years from now, people can listen to it and hopefully enjoy it still. If they don't, well, then... I mean, what was the Mona Lisa? Just a painting, you know? I've seen sculptures in the middle of some of these city centers. I mean, I go, oh, Jesus Christ, what the hell is that? I saw one that was a gigantic clothespin, and that's all it was. But since the person who put it there was, quote, unquote, an artist, it was an object of art. So, you know, it just depends. It's just a matter of terminology.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because I was reading this book, The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, and this guy wanted to be an artist, so he would wear very thick glasses when he didn't need any glasses, and he would walk with shoelaces untied and trip over them.
Now that gets right back to what I was saying before about being honest. I mean, not having to put on your suit to go out on stage and do something. I've seen guys who put on makeup, to put on the real tight pants, but they'll feel uncomfortable and look uncomfortable because they are uncomfortable. Now, because some people, they go, wow, Dave, those are some outrageous clothes. Well, he wears stuff like that all the time. That's just Dave, that's him. I'm the slob, you know?
How do you feel about glitter, like Alice Cooper, Bowie, things like that? How does that relate to what you do? Does it at all?
Oh, I've seen, I like Alice's show, especially before he started playing golf on the Mike Douglas show.
Yeah.
I think that blew his credibility a bit, and especially now with his completely new image.
When he was on the Hollywood Squares, that killed it for me.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That was one of the better rock shows I saw. I remember it was in the Hollywood Bowl, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and a helicopter came in and flew in so low, this thing was deafening. I'm surprised the FAA didn't get down on it. That was pretty dangerous. I think we ran out of gas. 20,000 people would have been dead. But yeah, I like his show, and there are certain things I like about Bowie. We played some of his music. I haven't followed up on him lately. I mean, he changes his character and image, like I changed my underwear. Of course, for him, it's become standard. It's the norm. He does that almost every year. He comes out with something different. So you come to expect it of him. And in that sense, being different is being sane.
Do you find that since you've become a very, very popular band, probably one of the most popular around now, that you've lost some contact with your audience?
No, that's not true at all.
I was somewhat surprised that you were available to do an interview.
Yeah, well, we haven't lost contact at all. A lot of bands go out and they'll say they play, or they will play small clubs. Now, to me, that seems like losing contact. They say that they like to be intimate with the people. Well, I don't think it's very intimate if, say, Van Halen was to go into a town like Boston and play a 500-seat hall when 10,000 people want to see you. That means 9,500 of them don't get to see you, which disappoints them, and it's just a pain in the ass for everybody. There's going to be a riot at the club, and you need to change the name. People are bound to find out. I think it's garbage, just playing the clubs. I don't see any reason why you can't be close to people, 10,000 people, 20,000, whatever. They're all there.
What's something that you've always wanted to talk about in the press that no one's asked?
Your love life. I can't really think of anything. I'll talk about anything.
Tell me about your love life.
I'll tell you what, you follow us back to the hotel after the show.
What kind of things can we expect from Van Halen in the future?
Okay, Van Halen just takes it one day at a time. I hate to use that word. It's like a movie. We take it as it comes. We don't plan. We write all the time, and we have one of the greatest outside influences, which is Ted Templeman. Because when we get off tour, which will be in December sometime, I think, we'll go into the basement where we rehearse, And we'll play all the songs that we've written over the last year. And Ted will listen, and his first impression of the songs that he hears, which are good, will usually be the ones that end up on the album. The last album was done maybe out of 50 songs. We might do something quasi-religious next year. Who knows? We didn't know that we were going to add little keyboards in this album until we actually sat down in the basement and just Ed started playing it a little bit, and there it was. And the Great Little Rock. First take, so we put it on the album, first song. But I'll tell you, Ted's a great guy. When we get together in the studio, he's like a fifth member of the band. We all throw ideas around, and Ted just tries to make some sense out of it. Somebody has to be sane in there.
How long is this tour going to last now?
Until about December, I think. It'll be a total of about 10 months. In that course, we just came back from Europe. It's good to be back in the States. Thank God.
What do you miss most when you go? Good food.
Yeah, you miss the food.
Say.
Yeah, it's true. It really makes me laugh when we come back and a friend of mine will walk up and say, "Oh my God, isn't this marvelous? I'm going to spend 3 weeks in England." All right, you telling us some nasty shit. I don't mean to knock the people. It's just one of those things. The food is not very good. The weather is absolutely unbearable. It's always raining, always muggy. The audiences are great. They love rock and roll. They love to get into it. And the proof of that is because 90% of the bands around on the radio are English. As for the rest of Europe, Holland is my home country, so it's nice to go back there once in a while. And we just finished playing the largest festival they ever had there, a place called Pink Pot. 50,000 Dutch people there. And that was good. But it's really nice to be back in the States. There's no way to describe it.
December, go January and February, record another album, and then back on the road again.
Yeah, the last album we recorded took 10 days, and then, of course, the mandatory mixing and remixing. But the actual recording process takes very few days, so I see no problem at all.
How long have you been on the road now? I guess.
We left February or March, but I don't know what month this is.
This is July. Right?
Okay, so I don't know how many months is that.
Does it bother you? Do you get tired? Or?
No, you get used to it. As a matter of fact, even before the record and before the touring, we were almost doing the same thing, only on a smaller scale. We would play 45-minute sets a night in the club, 5-6 days a week. And it would all be a rather long traveling distance, 2-3 hours, which is your average plane flight from city to city anyway. And now all we do is we play about 100 minutes. We used to play 5 hours. No slow songs.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Tapes Archive podcast. Please remember you can always find more information about the show and the individual episodes at our website, thetapesarchive.com. Until next time, the vault is closed.